Welcome to Spectrum Perspectives, real talk with parents, professionals, and autism advocates, with your host, Cindy Gellermini.
Hi, everyone. It's Cindy with another episode of Spectrum Perspectives. I want to do a little introduction today because today's episode is a little bit different than usual. Usually, I interview one person at a time, usually a parent of someone with autism. Today's going to be a little bit more of a roundtable discussion with two people that I've already had on the show before, Alexandra Ponsica and Honey Rinicella. Alexandra is very active on Facebook and she's very passionate about spelling to communicate. And she's been through a lot with her kids in school and has had a lot of issues. And she's very vocal. And she's having a big issue right now with her son's experience with ABA in his school. ABA is very controversial, but if you're one of my followers, you'll know I'm not afraid of controversial subjects. Okay, so I really wanted to hit on this and have a discussion about it because Alexandra's really upset about the ABA, but Honey Rinicella chimed in and said that she and her son Vince had a great experience with ABA. So it's two opposing views, but they know each other and love each other. And so we have a great, really respectful conversation about ABA therapy, and I chime in with my own concerns. So I just want to tell you a little bit about who's going to be on this episode, all right? The first one is Alexandra. She has four kids, I think, four or five, I think four kids. Her twin boys are both on the spectrum, and because of her son's non-speaking autism, she learned about spelling to communicate. She became a practitioner and she opened up a center in New Jersey teaching other kids how to spell to communicate. And she's the one that I learned about spelling to communicate from. I had never heard of S2C before until she started talking about it on Facebook. And then she is the one that held a premiere movie viewing in a theater of the Spellers movie. The whole reason that I've learned about S2C and the Spellers movie and everything that I focus on in my podcast now is all because of Alexandra and what she posted on Facebook. And I've learned it from her. Okay. Now, Honey Rinicella, who's also going to be on here, she was in the Spellers movie, and you can go back and watch my interview that I had with Honey. But this time I asked her to bring her son Vincent on. So Vincent is on as well with his S2C practitioner. Her name is Katie, and she's going to be sitting with Vince and just helping him to, maneuver his board and everything and to communicate with us. And then the last person that's going to be on here is Heidi. And Heidi is a BCBA, and she worked with Vince doing ABA therapy with him. So we're all going to discuss all the aspects of ABA, the good, the bad, and the ugly, all right, in this episode. And I really hope that this is something that goes out to the masses, because what I've learned from this episode is we need to revamp ABA, incorporate it into a spelling and a little bit of DIR floor time. If we can combine all of these methods together, then maybe we'll start coming up with a perfect way to work with and teach with these kids. Even though I know there's nothing perfect, but I'm hoping to that the methods evolve and expand and improve over time. And that's sort of the goal, is to get this out there to everyone that does all of these methods. And how can we create a method that works the best for our kids? So here we go. Here's the episode. Hi, everyone. This is Cindy with another episode of Spectrum Perspectives, and we have a little bit of a different episode today. Usually I interview one person at a time. We have sort of a whole roundtable here because we're going to talk about a controversial subject, which shouldn't be controversial, but it is in autism world. We're going to talk about ABA. And we have Alexandra and Honey on today that they've been on the show before, but I want to bring them on because this subject is coming up, and I'd like to hear their opinions about the subject. And we're going to start with Alexandra first, and I'm going to switch the view to speaker view so that we can talk to Alexandra in a second. So Alexandra, you had posted recently on Facebook some of your concerns about ABA with your kids, and you've had a lot of issues with your kids' school, and you've had to pull them out of school and literally had to move to a new town to get them in a new school and get them the help that they need. So I'd like you to tell us some of your story about your experience with your boys. You have twin boys, and tell us about them in school.
Hi, yeah, thank you so much, Cindy. I think this is an important conversation to have so that all, our autistic non-speakers and all autistics can really get the support that they need. I had the boys in school since they were 3. We didn't really have an early intervention. We had a few months worth of it, but only because we were military and moving around a lot, so it didn't stick. So when we finally got into school, they were put into an ABA classroom. We loved the teacher. I became friends with the teacher. The teacher became the supervisor of special child services. And then I thought that they were doing great. Uh, Ironically, I took them to the Liberty Science Center in New Jersey, and Caleb, he has more speech. He's more unreliable, minimal speaker. And he was pointing to letters for the first time on a garbage can while we were there and saying them out loud. And I look back at this video and I'm like, oh my goodness, I wish I knew how smart and intelligent they were then. And I had shown this video to the teacher, and she was like, wow, we weren't even working on letters. And so she was impressed. When we left that teacher, we were so sad when they progressed to the new school for first grade. And things started to go a little sour. I think they started to get older, and they started to realize that they were in an ABA classroom separate from the rest of the school. There was no inclusion aside from maybe recess, but really their exposure to other students was not there. And that's when we started to see these behaviors. And I put it in quotes because from what I have learned now, I understand that there's so much going on there regarding sensory, and, regulation and all of those things. In 2020, I pulled them from school. I'm pretty sure most people obviously were homeschooled, but I did pull them from the district. And at this time, they were 8 years old, and I began to, JB Hanley showed me spelling to communicate, thanks to Honey and Vince. So early in 2020, this was around March that I learned about it. But because everything was shut down, I got on a Zoom call with Elizabeth Fossler, the creator of S2C. She taught me how to do it and started at home. I'm kind of the one-off person because you usually go to a
Yeah, you
practitioner.
didn't have to go to Virginia to go see her.
Yeah, so I started at home, and then I eventually did go to Virginia, but I started at home.
Hmm.
Um, and at this point, my mom was babysitting one of the twins and my other son, Owen, and I was doing one-on-one sessions and really bonding with the boys for the first time, getting to know them aside from them being in school full time. And it was breathtaking. It was so special, and they weren't even open yet. It was just so awesome that we were sitting there and we were engaging with each other, and we were reading age-appropriate content, and they were spelling and working on those motor skills. I really thoroughly enjoyed COVID because of it. And then I had a blessed surprise, my little princess, and I became pregnant. And she was born in 2021. And of course, as things started to open up, I started to feel safer putting them back in school. And I felt like this is the time where we need a program for them because this isn't going to be sustainable. I had reached out to the school, or I had reached out to my friend who was their preschool teacher, and I had asked her, what are my chances for getting out of district at this one school that I knew did RPM? And I was like, on the fence about it. I had heard mixed reviews about this school, and she said, oh, don't worry. What are you doing? And I said, spelling to communicate. And she's like, oh, don't worry. We'll get you everything you need. Just come back to school. We'll do it. And I was like, oh, great. You're the supervisor. You can help me, support me. Great. Good to go. So when they returned to school, it was fourth grade for them, and they were put into their classmates' mom's class. We love her. great human being, so dedicated. I can't even tell you, she works tirelessly for her students. And she loved my boys tremendously. But it was in an ABA classroom. It was a classroom separate from the rest of the school, and, discrete trials, all of that. And so when they started to go back to school, now they had a taste of what it felt like to have age appropriate content. We started listening to audiobooks during COVID. We were really engaging in that age appropriateness. So when they went back to school, it was like, oh, we're back in this discrete trials. We're back in behaviors. We're back in being separate from the school. And so they started to not do well again, and they started to have these behaviors resurface. And at that time, I started to learn the IEP process, which I had never learned before. I was a young mom. No one ever taught me. I had to start learning. I had to learn. I had so much that I needed to learn. So as I started to unpack, I started to realize, oh my God, what is happening? This is wrong. Their placement is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. Their goals are so low. And I started to advocate for them. And we started to see the self-injury. And it started, the head banging, the biting of the hands, the biting the arms, and it got so severe that they started to perform physical restraints. And I mean, loving staff. And this is where I feel conflicted about ABA, because I hear the argument, oh, well, it needs to be done well, or it depends on the therapist. Well, the teacher we loved, we had so much respect for her, and I knew she was coming from a place of love and kindness for my kids. But they needed to keep him safe, right? So these physical restraints began. And so it was a multiple person supine restraint, which is basically, you're not in a prone position, so your face is not on the floor, but my son's head would be facing up and it would be held down. The arms would be held down. And there would be multiple people pinning his limbs to the floor, and he could be there for 20 minutes at a time or 5 minutes. It could be a lengthy process. Ultimately, he ended up having so he had 3, and at the time that he had 3 physical restraints, I requested a functional behavior assessment, and I am surprised that they didn't offer one after the first one, but I requested one at 3, and the BCBA who conducted it, I thought it was a rather fine report. I think she did a great job overall. I really didn't see any issues with it. I even had some other BCBAs take a look at it, and they're like, this is a good report. But what I was seeing is a lot of attention seeking, denied access, task avoidance, some of those labels, where I thought we need to dive deeper and see, oh, this non-contextual laughter and banging his butt up against the wall, it might be sensory, it could be anxiety driven. And so the report didn't show those things. By the time he had 6 physical restraints, a behavior plan was implemented, and I wasn't fully opposed to it. I think the DRO that they had for him, it was 7 minutes, which I thought was kind of a lot for him. And I felt like it put a lot of pressure on him, and it could maybe cause some harm waiting for that long. But I went with it. I trusted the teacher, and I was like, okay, I believe in you, so let's try this. But I continued to advocate. Then he was transitioning to the middle school into 6th grade. So he was going to have a new teacher that we had never met before. And
This is just one of the boys you're talking about?
yes. However, it's just Noah is the one who has struggled significantly. Caleb, he struggles too, but he's more passive and kind of lets it go. But he also had 4 physical restraints as well.
Okay.
I need you to walk away. Hey, go. Guys, go color. Go do your bins. Yes, go.
Huh?
Yes.
Wait now?
Yes. I hate to put Caleb on the back burner. I just think with Noah, it's so severe, his trauma and his anxiety that he's endured. But Caleb did have 4 physical restraints as well.
Mhm.
I don't think they were necessary. I think that when he was fighting his knees, there wasn't anything going, he wasn't going to
I
harm
just
himself.
talked to someone recently that their son was restrained for 3 hours.
Oh my
Well, she
gosh.
showed up at the school and said, why are there bruises all over your son?" And they said, "Yeah, we were kind of getting worried because we had to restrain him for over 3 hours." I'm like, how is that even allowed? Anyway, I don't want to distract you. Go on.
Ugh.
This is just, I interject things for my viewers. So
No,
just to
that's
understand that you're not the only person.
I think there's definitely different strategies that need to be implemented prior to
Mm,
that.
mm.
I will say too that backtracking back to when I first got them back into school, I asked for spelling to communicate to be implemented. And of course, I was misled by our friend, the supervisor, who said, no, we can't do it. Hey, let's get an AAC evaluation. We had an AAC evaluation conducted. It was BS. I mean, the
Oh,
speech
AAC? Because you cut out a little bit. Okay, so for people that don't know, it's a different device, the AAC device. Yeah, it's a communication device.
alternative and augmentative
Yeah.
communication,
Mhm.
which S2C is a form of. It's just a no tech. It could be low tech, or now how Vince is typing, it's high tech.
Right. You're
But
just using a stencil board instead of a
yes.
device.
So the speech therapist who conducted the evaluation thought that my son couldn't couldn't decipher between the Pink Floyd Prism album cover and a triangle. She thought that if we put that album cover for his Pink Floyd tech, that he was going to associate every triangle with Pink Floyd. I'm like, he's not an idiot. He really, like, really. So I was frustrated and I was fighting that battle, but I was also just trying to make their goals more appropriate and trying to really like reach them. Their OT report was all about behaviors. It was all thinking that it was maladaptive behaviors and that they were misbehaving. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's about regulation, sensory, all this. And so then when they were transitioning to the middle school, I had I had kind of pushed. I was like, listen, I want full inclusion. I knew I wasn't going to get it, but I was like, I need full inclusion for my boys. Let's do it. And so because I came so strongly, they at least let Caleb integrate into an LLD classroom, learning and language disabilities. And they were shocked that he was thriving. They were like blown away that he was thriving. And I was like, well, why did it take so long to get him out of a segregated classroom and get him with his peers? Then we transitioned to the middle school. And on day one, Noah was physically restrained. And so at this point, he had become open. He was still newly open on his letter boards, but he was like, I'm not going back. And you could
Right. And
tell.
just to clarify for people that don't know what that means, when you say open, because I had to learn all this stuff myself, it means that now he's not just answering questions with, like one word answers. He's now speaking openly, saying whatever he wants to say. So go ahead.
Thank you. So at that point, he didn't want to go back. He had severe anxiety. We had a meeting with the supervisor and who was our friend at one point, and she said, okay, we won't, do restraints anymore. I followed up with an email asking her to put it in writing. You couldn't put it in writing, so it wasn't going to happen. And then that kind of started, and because it was a new environment and a new teacher, it was really traumatic for Noah. Really traumatic. This entire transition was so horrifying for him. And the anxiety got worse, the self-injury got worse. And I mean, that's where I started to fight really hard and I started to get really like worn down about it. I wanted them out of that ABA. I wanted them done with the ABA. I was done with the discrete trials. I was done with the behaviors. I was done with this mindset. And I mean, I pulled him for weeks at a time. He started having seizures. So then I was dealing with that. Anxiety induces seizures too.
Mhm.
So we were dealing with it. I mean, he was having seizures almost every other day. I was just, we were really struggling. And honestly, the only way out was to relocate. We moved, and now we're in a safe environment. My boys are only in school 90 minutes a day, but that's due to certain policies that we're working on meeting criteria for. And but they are in a DIR school and they are
Okay, explain
thriving.
what that is. Explain what
Uh,
DIR is.
the it's the relationship-based floor time model. Um, and the school follows this model. They do have a BCBA though. They take data. The BCBA is trained in both ABA and DIR, and they have a spelling to communicate class. So they are fully being supported, and that's kind of our success story. However, we just are fortunate enough to have been able to relocate to get to where we are. So
So this is
my
a public school that has,
no, no,
oh,
this is an out
okay.
of district. This is an out of
Okay.
district. The new school district that we came to, it's a farm town. Like they couldn't support my kids.
Okay.
So they immediately just sent us out. And the only school that I would allow them to go to is not an ABA out of district. It was this school. I
Yeah, that
will
offers the
just
S2C.
say, I
What
will
school
just
is
say,
this that allows S2C?
it's celebrate the children.
Okay. All right, good. We got to
Yeah,
share that for people in New Jersey. Okay.
so good. They're so good. And I think they're the same school that I wanted to get the boys into when they were only doing, other spelled communication methods, but
Mhm.
they've evolved so much and I'm really happy with their team. However, I will say I was also we became part of a organization, Positive Development, and we were doing in-home therapy, which is DIR model. And I will say it was really healing for us. The boy Noah worked through a lot of his trauma. We had started it in our old house, and continued to do it up until a week ago, due to insurance issues. The one thing that I will say about DIR is I feel like it's so child-led that there's a component that kind of lacks structure, something that ABA does have. And so I feel like I'm missing a piece when we're doing DIR that does lack that structure. And DIR also really focuses on body and what the body is showing. And we know with apraxia and with our non-speakers that the body is so unreliable. It's really hard to trust, how the body's going. So it wasn't a perfect therapy. It was
Right.
good and healing. But there's still something missing. And I think that's where all my questions are stemming from is like we had such a traumatic, horrifying experience. It makes me really emotional thinking about what we went through. And I know that I'm not the only family that's been through that, right? But how is it that this is happening to so many families? And what do we need to do so that it doesn't happen to families like mine and other families is
Right.
really where I'm coming from.
Right. Right. Yeah, and you mentioned with the DIR and body lead. I mean, I've interviewed people and I've heard many stories about even talking to Elizabeth Vossler, their body's doing one thing, their mouth is even saying something, go home, go home, go home, and they're trying to leave. But then when they start to spell, they're saying, I'm having such a great time. I love being here. So it's very unreliable, to to go by what's happening with their body. So it sounds to me like we need to sort of combine both theories a little bit to come up with a more perfect method. I see Honey wants to say something, so I'm going to let her. Honey, unmute yourself, and then you can
Yeah, I'm
interject.
crawling out of my skin. I'm
I
crawling out of
know.
my skin. I mean, first of all, as a mom, right?
Mhm.
I am crying with you, okay? Because no child should be restrained that way. And I literally, it's like hard for me to even say this, right? So I'm on here with you guys to show you what it can look like and how positive it can be because Heidi was my boy's BCBA from the time, I mean, I don't know, Heidi, were they like 7 or 8? They were 6? They were 6? Oh my gosh. So they were 6. So 18 years ago, when Heidi came to my house, I was trained in DIR, which is floor time, and I was also trained in ABA, and we did something called like PRT, which was like pivotal response training. It kind of was like a combination of both when I was in Atlanta. And when I moved here, when I met Heidi, I knew it was like a match made in heaven because it's exactly what you're saying, Alexandra. It's exactly the kind, child-led, friendly in a natural environment. ABA was what she did with my children because she recognized they were children first. She recognized this is a sweet little 6-year-old. I can't even believe they were 6-year-old, sweet little boy that needs me to sit on the floor next to him and rub his back while he's playing with blocks and grab a car and teach him purposeful motor with that car. So I had such a vastly different experience because I had somebody like Heidi. I think a lot of what we see, and this is just me interjecting, it's so hard to hear that story because it's so different from what I experienced. And I think what we need to get out there loud and clear that there are, it's just like there's like 10,000 different S2C practitioners. There's 10,000 different, speech pathologists and doctors and whatnot. There are vastly different ABA therapists, and some just haven't had the proper training, in my opinion. I mean, Heidi was, heavily involved in the Pennsylvania Verbal Behavior Project. Anybody that came under her absolutely did ABA like her. Nothing at all that you're mentioning. Only once did they have to, I will say this once in Vincent's entire schooling, and Vince, you can interject on this. Did they have to restrain him when he was becoming so self-injurious? They were scared he was really going to hurt himself, which I do know can happen because, like you, I have twins, and my other son, Victor, who's not really a behavioral mess, ended up getting a concussion at school because of his behavior when he wasn't restrained, which triggered a really significant, horrific, life-threatening seizure disorder, right? So I do know that a restraint to protect them is not something that should be a commonality, but something that is utilized in a very serious incidents. Like my son Victor should have been restrained so he didn't suffer a concussion. But Vince once was restrained when he was crawling out of his skin, and we don't know if he had a reaction to a medicine or a BC. We don't know what it was because at the time he couldn't communicate. And I have to tell you, the teacher and Heidi were just as upset, if not more, than I was that it had to occur. So I feel like we need to, I'm so glad we're having this discussion because I don't ever want people to think I go against what you say. I am 100% supportive of what you experienced. Cannot happen. I am like an advocate for all of our kids and for it to be done right, right? So it's the same as like spelling to communicate. Like there is a program, and if I can really quickly, Cindy, I will say the one thing I tell people, and I know people hate me for saying this, but I know Heidi and Katie and Vince will agree. But when I saw the hierarchy and the program through spelling to communicate that you start with intense support and then the goal is to fade it to extinction, and you give them heavy prompts and then you fade your prompts and then you give them easy skills and then you make the skills harder and you build, right? I literally looked at Heidi and I said, this is all ABA. They just don't know it's ABA. And I'm like, they're hating ABA, but they're doing ABA. So I was like, we need to have this conversation to share with people that we're doing the same thing. The focus needs to be, child driven, done with love, and recognizing our kids' abilities, right? So that's where the issue stems, in my opinion. But I'll divert to you guys discussing this because I know Vince had a lot he wanted to interject when Alexandra asked some questions, and I know Heidi probably has a lot to say. But it's so painful for me to hear a mother having that experience when my experience was completely different, completely. And I understand. I mean, that some people hate it, but I understand there is a place for it as well if it's done well and with love, in my opinion.
Well, the same thing will happen with spelling to communicate as well. I mean, this is why there's, ASHA has this statement out and everything because of bad practices with facilitated communication 30 years ago, and so and I've heard some bad stories about spelling as well. And it all depends on the person, who's doing it. But I think one of the issues that some people have with ABA is the reward based. And I'm gonna shoot this one over to Heidi. Let's have Heidi unmute so that we can talk to her about it. Um, so when my son, he would be 35 now. Okay. So I'm assuming things have changed over the years. He went to a school that that's all they did was ABA. They didn't even call it ABA. They called it something else, behavioral something. I forget, but that was just what they did. And it would be, they would sit him, and I have video of it that I've put on YouTube, and he would sit in a chair and they say, Robbie, do this. And as soon as he did it, good boy. And they'd give him an M&M. All right. And then I go to SeaWorld and I see the dolphin do a flip and they toss him a fish. And I said, oh my God, that's what they're doing with my son. They're training him like a dog, like an animal. And what happened was the progression was when he became an adult, he had to be told what to do. He was very well behaved, but he was not independent. And he would just stand there and wait for someone to give him a command and tell him, Robbie, go hang up your coat. Okay, then he'd go hang up, then he'd come back and he'd wait, and then and they move away from the food reward to high five, good job, so um and I never saw it as a bad thing. I thought, when he was little, I used to babysit another boy and I had the two of them together and Robbie learned how to sit at a restaurant, be well behaved, and the other kid was running circles around the restaurant. And I said, every kid needs ABA. Every kid needs to learn, what behaviors are appropriate in a public setting and what are not. So I feel like I think the reason that I want to do this is because I don't want to I'm not here to bash ABA or anything. I'm hoping that it's improved over time and it's evolving just the way spelling has. We went from facilitated to RPM to S2C now to Speller's method, right? It just keeps improving, keeps getting better. And what can we get out there to everybody to understand, how can ABA and DIR and S2C and how can we blend them all together until we get the perfect methods? So go ahead, Heidi.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to be efficient with everyone's time. I mean, I think I'm so sorry for your experience, Alex. That just hurts my heart. That's never what it's intended to be. I think, and I hope more people understand ABA isn't to be in control for someone to be in control. It's to make someone's quality of life better. It's to help them have meaningful relationships and be safe and be independent so that they don't need an M&M when they're at a restaurant or out at SeaWorld or, just walking outside of their house. I mean, I think what Honey talked about, whether it's ABA or spelling to communicate, is it should be systematic. So ABA is that scientific piece, where we're taking some data and it's not just willy-nilly. There's some sort of systematic nature of it. I think where people get off the beaten trail is when they kind of fall into that one size fits all and they don't use that team approach. And I think it's really important to highlight the team approach includes not just professionals, but parents. They know their kids best, and kids. Like yes, I understand, their body might not always speak clearly and convey what they want or don't want. But I think it's important to pay attention to trends with kids. And I think the field, fortunately, hopefully this gives you some comfort. The field has really changed in the over 20 years that I've been implementing programs based on ABA. I will say when I first started, it was changing from that like very routinized clap your hands or do this and
then constantly recording every single thing that they do. Recording every movement.
Yeah, it's changed a lot. I mean, I will say, you guys have trained kids toilet training. We use edibles to teach kids to, remain dry and potty in the toilet. So, I mean, sometimes you have to start somewhere. And with any individual, I think you have to start with what's most meaningful to them so that they're actually attentive to the skill you're trying to teach. But I think if I could encompass everything that everyone said, the missing link is that there's not a one size fits all. There's a team approach that needs to be utilized. Yes, we do have to pay attention to the trends and improvements and never get comfortable with just one way of doing things overall, but also for a child and their family. And I think if you can put everything together of what turns on behavior and what turns it off, what's socially valid for that individual and their family, and you think ahead, you think about, okay, well, are they going to need this M&M forever? I need to start like pairing it with other things that are more natural. I know, Alex, you talked about the program that your son was in a self-contained classroom. I mean, sometimes that's helpful to kind of remove some of that sensory input. A lot of kids that I've worked with over the years get very dysregulated and overstimulated with just the movement and noise around them. They can hear a pin drop. So being in a classroom with 20 other kids, that is so overstimulating. It's like trying to parallel park with the music on high. I can't do those things. So I think some kids learn in a different environment. And I think it's just important to have that team-based approach that everyone is heard, including parents and individual students. I'm so horrified hearing about a 3-hour restraint and restraints being the norm of how behavior was managed. The ABA that I've always implemented and have been taught, and it's been encouraged time and time again since I started in 2001 to now, is always focus on those proactive strategies. You should never just use reactive measures to control behavior. I just think sometimes, unfortunately, there's such a great demand that there's just not the right training out there. And so I think as a parent, you should always advocate for your child and never feel bad about that. But I think at the same point, you do get a lot with honey, not honey Renicella, but if you can be compassionate and kind back to the team members and everyone plays well together, I think that's when you can make the most meaningful impact, whether it's ABA alone versus DIR versus a whole combination of ABA, spelling to communicate, DIR, whatever approach works best for the individual. It's important everyone's continually needing to work on what works best for the child and that you're making meaningful progress. But again, I will say, as a behavior analyst from day one, I've always been taught to be systematic, take some sort of data so I can see what I'm doing works, and then work on teaching kids responses that the environment is going to support them so that they can create those meaningful relationships, so that they can learn from the natural environment, and always change things if they're not working, constantly assessing what's working and what's not working, I think is highly important. But the last thing I will say is that even though the training isn't great for everyone, I mean, I know you said you're in a small town now and they don't have the right programming. It doesn't mean that it can't be achieved. And the greatest thing, I work in both New Jersey and Pennsylvania. The greatest thing is that parents work with the trainers, and the trainers, whether it's a behavior analyst or another sort of consultant, that it transfers to all environments. So teachers, I think what you were talking about didn't sound just like an ABA issue. It sounded like an education system problem, which I have encountered in a lot of different school districts where I've consulted. Some schools, they just don't invest in the training, and then, they're left with old school ways of doing things like reprimands and sending kids out because, they are focused on the large group versus the individual, if that makes sense. So I don't know, Vince, do you have any thoughts Did I hit everything?
No offense to anyone else, but I just have to say that when Vince heard Heidi talking and saw her face appear on the screen, he just completely lit up.
I saw that. Yeah.
I know Vince is typing and you can edit this, Cindy, but
Mhm.
I have to tell you, Alexandra, like that's what it's supposed to be, right? It's supposed to be somebody that invests in your child, like Heidi did to Vincent. So the first time, this is really beautiful to share. The first time I told Heidi that this was happening, I asked her to come over and have a conversation with Vincent. She read the book, was a little offended at how harsh they were to ABA. And then I said, just come have a conversation. They sat down and had this incredible conversation. And one of the most powerful things happened. After about, I don't even know, Heidi, like an hour and a half, after like an hour and a half, the Vincent was they were getting ready to leave. And they ended up saying, um, she said, Vincent, it was so good talking to you. I'll see you later. And then the next thing you know, Vincent started to have intense behaviors. And he was screaming, and Heidi said, "Oh, I think this was too much. It's overstimulating for him." And I went over and I picked up the device. And do you remember this, Heidi? I said, "Vince, are you okay? What's going on?" And he said, "I just have so much I want to share with her." And he didn't want her to leave. He didn't want her to leave.
Oh,
Like it was so important that he could share. Like he thanked her for everything he had done when she was younger. This is why I'm not like the advocate for ABA. I'm the advocate for doing what our kids need. And Heidi has nailed it, right? So even in that moment where she heard somebody attacking ABA, she came and said, I value this kid. I want to hear what he has to say. I love him and I want to learn this. And so it was the most beautiful thing that he had shared that with her, that he wasn't upset about the conversation and stirring it up. He was upset that she was leaving, that they couldn't talk more.
You want to hit enter?
I just love how you said that there is a one-size-fits-all approach. I think that is the biggest flaw.
Something else I was thinking about is like if you go to a physician to address a medical concern of your own with your body, you would try to find referrals to the right physician because not every physician is going to have the same values that you do. I would say the same would be true for a practitioner in ABA. You want to find the right match. And, I have found it could be helpful if you interview a few, get some recommendations from people and ask if you can have a conversation to see if your values align to theirs before you accept, someone working with your child. I think anyone that's opposed to that is probably going to be a little bit of a red flag, just because they're not open to being flexible themselves.
what do you call at an ABA center? You've got a BCBA, you have an ABA, but then there's people under that go out to the homes and do the ABA with them. It's a two-letter word. What is that called?
Well, every company calls it something a little bit different. A BCBA should be overseeing the clinical programming and the data and monitoring for, necessary changes. Then there is a behavior health technician, and that's that person that is that one-to-one or
BHT.
in
Okay.
schools. Yep. They would be one-to-one with a child, maybe 2-to-1. I mean, our goal is always to fade back so that a child can
Right.
function independently. But some companies call it like a clinical associate. Some companies call it what did my last school district call it? I mean, sometimes they'll just call it a behavioral aid. An RBT is just a certified behavioral health technician. So they've gone through training, they've taken a test to pass, and then they require 5% of their hours being supervised by a BCBA.
Right. Well, one of the things that I've heard a complaint about is that they just have to be 18, a high school diploma, and they just go through a short amount, maybe 2 weeks of training, and then they're out in the field and they're going to people's homes and working with the kids, and they feel that they're not trained well enough.
Sure.
The other complaint that I hear is that they quit all the time. People, they work with them for a few weeks, the kids are used to having them around, and then they quit and they move on. And that it's also a big business now. and it's a multi-million dollar business. I personally have, and I don't really care if they hear this, I have ABA companies that contact me all the time that want to be part of what I do because they hire marketing people to get their name out there, and it's such a turnoff to me to see that it's turned into a big business that's all about making money, and to see that they have people that are not trained that are going out there. And I understand the issue is when my son was diagnosed with autism, it was 1 in 10,000 kids. Okay, it was not well known, right? There were not ABA centers, that you did not have people come to your home. There was none of that. Okay. He got it. That's how they taught him at his school. And now it's 1 in 31 kids. So now everybody knows somebody with autism. So now there's so many kids that need ABA that they can't even keep up with it. Right. So that's an issue that I don't know how to solve. Because the people that were working with my son, had college degrees in special ed and whatever. They usually, the special ed teachers eventually became a BCBA. They would go back to school for another year or whatever, and that's how that worked. So again, I don't really know what the answer is for that, but I think that's part of the problem, is that people know people that don't know what they're doing. The other thing is, like Alexandra was talking about, is that's all they taught in my son's school. All they looked at was behavior. They never taught him anything. And from the time he was 3 till he was 21, all they did was work on behavior and take notes on his behavior. And he had no goal. His goals were, he will learn how to put his pants on by himself. He will learn how to put cans on the shelf. It was very simple. And I was like Alexandra. I was very young when I had my kids. I didn't know anything. And there was not even internet back then. So there was no Facebook autism pages for me to talk to people about this. I knew nothing. All I knew was I thought his teachers were the experts, and I just did what they said. So for me now to learn about spelling and to presuming competence, and to find out that all this time my son was really in there and he probably wanted to learn things, but they just treated him like a baby his whole life. And all they worked on was him being obedient with his behaviors, and that's all that he learned. That's so this is what I want to fix. Like, how can we, and it's the schools, like you said, the schools are still stuck in their old ways, and the schools are still only doing ABA, and they're not allowing spelling to come in. And this is the other thing that people believe, and I don't know what's correct or not. I'm just quoting what other people say, is that because ABA and speech therapy is big money business, that bringing in spelling is going to cut in on their business. And so that's why they are trying to discredit spelling. I hope that's not true. I hope it's just their ignorance. Um, and I'm hoping that we can combine. It sounds to me like the DIR, a little bit of ABA, and the spelling all together would be the perfect learning method. But we have to get schools on board, and that's been the big fight. So
100%.
I also kind of want to piggyback, just because I feel like I want to just summarize to something of Cindy, and I'd like to get some of these questions asked too, because I agree that it could be, a school system problem. I think ultimately my big question is, what is ABA? What makes good ABA ABA? Because
right. What is the goal? That's my question. What is the end goal of it?
And also I say that because I tend to see a certain type of, you can tell when a therapist is an ABA therapist. They talk in a certain way, and sometimes I am concerned about how it comes across to our non-speakers, as it could come across as condescending and disrespectful. And I see this over and over again from these BCBAs or therapists. And it's common, and for it to be so common, there's some systemic issue happening that this is the way. So I'm also kind of want to understand, how do we presume competence with our goals? What does that ABA well done look like? So we are presuming competence and making sure that these goals are appropriate. And not as focused on behaviors, though it seems that ABA is focused on behaviors while integrating all the necessary other forms like sensory and regulation and acknowledging cognitive intelligence. How does that all fit into a ABA done well model?
Can we have Heidi answer that? And then maybe can we have Vincent just because of time? I know that he's only available till noon, but can he maybe after Heidi answers that, answer your direct questions to him, Alexandra? Because he actually typed them out, and I know he would probably love to share those answers.
I would love to hear them.
So my thought is there were a lot of questions and concerns between Cindy and Alex. I mean, what's coming to me the most quickly is, again, I think balance is so important. And if you can, based on some concerns you had, Cindy, with like people coming into the field and only caring about the money piece, that's always going to be the case wherever you go. I've experienced it with some of the staff I've overseen, and I will say since COVID, it's gotten a lot worse because people are just so overloaded in general. I think the human condition is just really hard right now for everybody. But I think better interviewing is part of the solution, like from the early on stage. Interviewing and looking for not just like clinical understanding, but perspective taking of others, openness to input, just general integrity. Because I've had people that have been trained so well and they are so inflexible and so not eager to try something new, even though it might not have a ton of research. So I think that's one kind of bullet point to check off of the things you guys brought up. I think the other piece is, we're not going to be able to correct the education system that easily because unfortunately teachers aren't paid they're not paid well. And, if funding is cut to education, that's only going to create more of an issue because you're going to have bigger classrooms and people that just are overloaded and not really passionate anymore. Again, I mean, the interview process that can kind of help, tackling going to psychology and education programs and really trying to build that into the curriculum at the college level. But, I've had some people that don't have a college education and are incredible clinicians. And I'd rather see integrity and perspective taking and openness and compassion than, a 4-year degree at this point. That's just what I've experienced over the past 2 years. I'm kind of at a point where I'd love someone to get their RBT or further training, but the foundation has to be there. And that goes back to that interviewing piece. I'll answer the quick question about what's the overall goal of ABA. The overall goal is to provide some structure and teach that balance of the vital skills for a person while also being compassionate and improving that child's quality of life and their family's quality of life. I mean, again, it depends on the family and the child's values. Maybe they don't value having relationships with their community. And if that's what they want and their family doesn't go out into the community, then, I would just put it out to the family like, okay, well, what happens when, you as parents aren't there anymore? Where do you see your child going? I think those conversations are really important to have. But the end goal is to improve the quality of life for the individual and their significant others. And then what would go along with that would be increase independence, increase their communication so that they can advocate for themselves, increase their ability to make decisions because then they can say, I don't like that, or I do like that. That would be the general overall goal. I mean, I even education for kids that don't have added needs. Education has changed so much. Now in high school, they can pick their classes so much more than when I was in high school. I think society overall is starting to understand neuro differences and kind of take the lead of the child to an extent about what they value most. So I think, programmatic wise, I think we always have to focus on what's vital to the person and then what what their values are and what their family's values are. And then, again, that working with the team piece. I've worked with really smart people, but man, have they been inflexible. And that kind of like it plateaus your programming. So that openness is really important from the get-go. I don't know if there was one other thing I think is important to say, because, I see both sides. I can compassionate with parents and kids, and then I can also see teachers who work hours on hours and BCBAs that work till 2 a.m, and they care so much about helping and making meaningful change. I think it is important that as team members, everyone, remembers that everyone's doing their best. Sometimes I think we can be quick to make assumptions about people's intentions, and they're not always real. Sometimes our negative experiences can create those assumptions. And I think it's just important to be mindful of, from the practitioner standpoint and, the standpoint of a parent. And I mean that with full compassion and understanding that I don't have those requirements of me 24/7. So I can understand, you might, as a parent, you might make assumptions more often, and that's okay. And I can move on as a professional. I think it's just important for both or all team members to continue to be mindful of those assumptions that we're making so that we can all work well together.
All right, I want to throw this over to Vince if we can.
Really quick on that. Because I just feel like I think I've questioned the method entirely because I've loved the teachers. The teachers were well-meaning, and I feel like I'm throwing them under the bus if I blame them for what's happened with my boys when they were up till 2 a.m, researching things when they shouldn't have because they're not paid enough. And so I have always, seriously, the last 2 teachers, they were in my boys' pocket. They did the best they could, but I felt like they were following something that wasn't fit for them, which is where some of my questions, I guess, comes into all of it. But go ahead, Vince.
All right, so for, I guess, your first question about if you were training new therapists, how would you define what good ABA looks like and what practices or values? We typed
Presuming competence and teaching motor skills and coping mechanisms for sensory-seeking behaviors over compliance.
Do you want to read that, Katie?
Yeah, so he said presuming competence and teaching motor skills and coping mechanisms for sensory-seeking behaviors over compliance. And then for your question of why do you think ABA is done so poorly sometimes, let me get his answer ready to go.
The data tends to come before connecting with the client, and the root cause of behaviors is not correct, so the interventions don't do anything beneficial.
Can you repeat that, Katie?
Yeah. So he said the data tends to come before connecting with the client, and the root cause of the behaviors is not correct, so the interventions don't do anything beneficial.
Right. A lot of people, I know, a lot of special ed teachers and stuff think that they're behaving just to misbehave.
Right. And like when
they think they're just being bad.
The antecedents were wrong about, attention seeking or task avoidance, all that stuff. I think Vince is still saying that, we still need that ABC, but we're getting the A wrong. So, and then I think the next question was what would you say to non-speakers who have experienced bad ABA practices?
Your feelings are valid and you did not deserve the mistreatment you suffered. Let's work together to educate these therapists on how to work with non-speakers, because I don't think ABA is going away anytime soon.
Do you want to read that, Katie?
He said, your feelings are valid and you did not deserve the mistreatment you suffered. Let's work together to educate these therapists on how to work with non-speakers, because I don't think ABA is going away anytime soon. Do you think ABA has evolved into something that's not really ABA anymore?
No, I think we are moving forward with a more person-centered practice than we had decades ago. It still uses the same core beliefs. Just now we are implementing those beliefs based on feedback from individuals on the spectrum.
So he said, no, I think we are moving forward with more person-centered practice than we had decades ago. It still uses the same core beliefs, just now we are implementing those beliefs based on feedback from individuals on the spectrum.
Thank God.
Yeah.
I mean, they're
Um,
nothing about us without us, right? So we have to include them. But it's great though that Vince can tell you, oh, this worked, this didn't. And, even though I have to tell you, Alexandra, I think your aides, although good intended, are to Heidi's point, they were just not trained properly. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're that good and you have this foundational, when you said what is ABA and that's what you're trying to figure out, to me ABA was teaching a skill that my child needed to know to improve his life. Like my Vincent was an eloper. He would elope all the time. My kids would run into the street. I mean, we were the first community to install slow child with autism signs in my entire you know area in my state. And we like had to develop them because they didn't even exist back in the day. I mean, my kids don't run in the street. Those types of behaviors, what I used to say to parents when I mentored for 20 years was that is okay for a 2-year-old, 4-year-old, and maybe a 6-year-old. But when that child's 18 years old and they're running into the street, they're not going to be cautious of a child running into the street. They're going to think it's an adult that's going to stop. And that behavior has to be shaped. And so when you say, what is ABA, when Heidi and I had a plan, I will say one thing. I think we're kind of missing a big component here about education. The VB map and the ABLES are two things that I felt were critical in helping my kids elevate who they are and show me that they were capable. Because I'm sure you're familiar with them, Alexandra. Are you familiar with them, Cindy?
No.
Heidi can speak to them a little bit more, but they were like a tool to say that part of the issue is too, the schools just throw them in an ABA classroom and they don't even teach them. I mean, when Vincent came out of school, even though I had a wonderful experience, to your point, Alexandra, we were getting ready to put Vince in college and he said, we were like, what do you want to do? And we were studying for the ACT. And he said, I really wish I could have gone back and learned everything my peers had learned because I was in a seclusion room. I wasn't privy to any of that content. So he said, I would like to go to a Celis Academy and learn this content just like all my peers had the chance to. Our kids are prohibited from that exposure. So he went through, his 4-year school to get the content that they were given in 18 months because he just wasn't provided it. I think the schools just aren't great at combining it, right? So they're like, oh, you're either in this slot or ABA or you're in this educational component. And I think it's like a school-wide system and they don't know how to incorporate it. But when we used a lot of our ABA program that we had set up was based on the ABLES and the VB map. Like, can your child stop when he's running out to, the street at the sidewalk and know where it is? And like, that's a measurable skill that I want to make sure my kids know before they turn into teenagers and somebody thinks, oh, a teen's going to stop before he walks in front of a car.
I just, how, because I still have these questions, right? Like, so how does it get implemented? Because my son elopes the other day. I mean, we just moved to this new house. Thank God my husband is a workhorse and he put up an entire fence around our large property, but we have a straightaway and people fly down our road and Caleb has escaped across my street. I'm so happy he's safe, but he hiked 3 miles down this trail and my husband had to take a quad to go get him. He could have been struck by a truck. Like, it could have been so bad. So I am in this with those things. I have property destruction. I have all these things, and because I have twins. When one is over here, I have this over here. And I understand their body is not in full control, but I understand they're also teenagers and hormones, and mom is sometimes annoying when I get under their skin at times. So I know it's not perfect. So how do we accomplish this with the right protocols, following ABA done well? Because I'm still confused.
Well, I will say that the one thing, see, I grew up in a home where we were always being hit and hair pulled and spanked and all that kind of stuff for just constantly. So the thing that I liked about ABA was there was no punishment. It was only reward, for the good behavior. So that was the thing that I liked about it. And so we always encouraged the good behavior with once we learned it with Robbie, I did it with all of my kids. Oh, good job. Oh, the good sitting, good, whatever. Even when we went to church, oh, good sitting, like instead of like sit down and shut up in church, it's like, oh, good sitting, Robbie, nice job. So it was a complete shift in our parenting. So that's the good side of it. But let's let Heidi answer your question.
I think as a parent in general, it's just overwhelming. I mean, especially in this age with social media. The first thing I would say is sit with your husband and make a list of your priorities. And with those priorities, then you meet with your team. I think language is so huge to be aware of. So if running into the street is one of your biggest concerns, then you think about all the words associated with running into the street. Sidewalk, street, grass, house, door, like all those things. And that might be way well below. I think your kids are teenagers, but I think that's the place I start, is thinking about the language relating to those priority concepts. And then I think about, all right, well, how is this child using those forms of language? Are they like Honey talked about, instruments to assess, can they talk about those things? Can they talk about those things without the visual present? Or do they need the visual present? Can they ask for those things when you're completing an activity talk? Like maybe you're, I don't know, putting together a puzzle about a scene, or you're in a book, reading a book together, and they're talking about those pictures. Can they ask to talk about that? Can they actually say those words, or can they spell those words? Can they find those words on a device with pictures? So those assessments help us to be systematic and organized, so that it's not just willy-nilly pulling things out of a bag, because that's when we all get overwhelmed. So that would be what I would say, is start, your husband and you make a list of your top priorities and just chunk things on what's most important now and what's going to be most important long term. That will help you kind of judge what you spend the most time on right now. There's a really great values cards deck that I actually encourage parents to do, because sometimes I'm married, and I've been married for 10 years, and it's hard just being married. So I've learned that if my husband and I can kind of be aware of each other's values, that's really helpful then in how we parent. So that's something else that, I think is an important part of the process too. Get on the same page with your values and what you value most for your child. And then, as your child can, have them give their input. And then use those assessments so that you can be like organized, instead of just like, oh, there's so much and where do I start? That's what those assessments are for, to help you just be systematic with it. Unfortunately, I've learned in education, sometimes schools don't have those tools, and it is kind of willy-nilly pulling stuff out of a bag, and that doesn't always work well.
Alexandra, did you ask him why he ran down the road afterward?
Vince typed some advice for you too, Alexandra.
Yeah. I was gonna ask Vince next.
Yeah.
Honestly, since we moved in, the spelling has gone it's so chaotic in here, and we haven't done much to be able to get there. I'd love to sit down but I'm not regulated. I haven't been regulated to be able to really dive into that with him.
It's emotional too as a parent. I mean, you're living my life, right? So, I mean, I had a BCBA at my house one time, and my aide, and Vincent disappeared, and we lost him. We had to call the cops. I mean, I have been exactly where you are. This is real. This is why I am such an advocate of people like Heidi helping us figure out, how do we stop that? It is absolutely a brain body disconnect. And that's the part that I feel like ABA doesn't understand, but they're learning, right? It's just because Vincent runs into the street does not mean that he wants to run into the
Right.
street. He'll say, I want to sit down and do something, but my body just had this rage of fight and flight because I saw something and it triggered me and I just ran to the street of all places. Why did I do that? And so, Heidi would come in and teach us, like, when your body feels like doing this, train your brain to do that. And it would be like a replacement. It was a replacement behavior, if I'm saying it right, Heidi. I mean, I've been out of this for so long because by the grace of God, my boys are pretty good now. But that was like we were replacing whatever was negative. We knew he needed to do something, but we needed to figure out how could we teach his body that's not the appropriate response. When you're in that fight flight, you can't leave. You cannot leave. And I will never forget that one time. Can I just share this with you? That one time that he eloped and he was in a neighbor's house, and thank God it was a neighbor we didn't even know. He was in a neighbor's house going through their mail. And when the girl walked in from the store, nobody was in the house. She saw him and was like, "Oh my God, there's a guy here, this young girl." And Vincent starts stimming, thank God. She goes, "Oh wow, are you Rhonda's brother?" And then he starts screaming. Thank God he wasn't shot. All I kept thinking was, if this was in a house, he was at this point 18. He could have been shot and killed if it was not a loving, friendly neighborhood. And that's where I was like, this can never happen again. I ran home, sat him at the table, and said, "What the hell are you doing? You cannot do this to me anymore. I cannot physically handle it anymore." And he said, "I'm tired of being in this house. I need to make friends." And I have to tell you, that's what he typed to me. And I'm telling you, I was like, I hear you. I understand. No more therapy in the house. We're joining a gym. We're going to social groups. We're getting you out. And so it changed everything I started doing when he could share with me he wasn't, his body was like, "Oh, I wish I could make friends." And he elopes and leaves, and we have to call 911 to find him. I mean, it's part in getting them to communicate with us to know how to shape the behavior, right? So I'll let Vince, I didn't want to interrupt you. Go ahead and share what you wanted to say.
I needed visual reminders on the door that said legs stay in the yard. I can relate to impulsively running out of a crazy house.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Our house is crazy, so I get it. I get
My
it.
house is crazy too. Yeah, with 2 dogs, 3 kids. Yep. Yep. The visual
I will
reminders,
say-
we did use that.
And Vince, I will say, Caleb has gone to my neighbor's house inside. He's a sweet old man, and this has happened now 3 times since we moved in. So, and it's always crossing the street. So thank you for sharing that, Vince. It makes my littles are so loud. They're quiet today, but gosh, when the twins are home, it's like, woo.
I think they feed on that energy too, though, right? So I feel like sometimes Vince says to us all the time, right, Vince, that we have a big swing set, and we actually bought like a King Kong swing set. It's probably one of the biggest things people ask me when they see the Spellers movie is, where did you get a swing set that big? We bought like an adult size one because that's where he goes to regulate himself. He has got to be left alone outside, and we have a great relationship now. I'm like, you can never leave without asking me. And he hasn't since. So that, I do
So
feel like,
I have another question for you, Vince.
Wait, hold on. I just want to just share one thing really quick. Well, anyway, I just want to show you. I don't know if you can see this. You see? In my children's book, who's eloping? And who are we talking to? Yeah. Yeah. Many times we called 911. Anyway, go ahead.
Wow. It's common.
Yeah.
And as parents, it gives us a heart attack.
Yes.
But
Many
then so because you're twin, I feel as a mother, I am helicopter mom. I'm constantly on top of my 13-year-old boys, and I feel like it's frustrating for them because I'm so worried about safety that a part of the problem is that I need them to be together at all times when we're together, because I'm afraid of the going one direction and going the other direction, the elopement or the safety concerns. And I'm sure you can relate in some sense to that. Do you have any advice for me to be able to ease up and kind of give Caleb and Noah more space so that they can have more autonomy and independence in our new home environment?
And I will tell you, Alexandra, it does get better when they get older. The eloping stops.
Hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Vince was 18. That one came out of nowhere. He
Yeah,
hadn't.
I'm talking about in their 20s.
Oh, yeah.
But this is why I love hearing Vince, because Robbie made the same vocalizations. It sounds like him.
And spelling wasn't available when Robbie was around. So
Well, whatever communication works. I mean, I think it's so important, because I mean, if you don't have communication, you're stuck inside. So whatever way a person can get out that communication is so important. That should be in your top 5 priorities. But going back to your questions, I mean, I think the first thing would be get those Apple AirTags, and I would put them in their shoes.
I did Angel say.
Oh, that's fine too. Whatever they accept, something to track them. At least it gives you peace of mind. I also reach out to all neighbors and police in the area to let them know, you know, you have 2 children that engage in these behaviors. They're safe, and give like a few quick tips of what helps them to be calm, which also has your phone number. Honey used to make cards, like business cards, that she would hand out around the community too. And if you're comfortable with doing that, I think, you know, the more your community is aware, you know, that's that training piece. And that's part of it. I am a very strong advocate of inclusion, because it not only allows kids the opportunity to be present when, you know, a lesson is being taught, like Vince said he wished he would have had, and for that exposure. But I think equally, inclusion is so important, because it teaches peers to be compassionate and to know how to work through, like, helping someone feel safe and calm. So I mean, it's another reason to really keep at your school district for inclusion opportunities. But we've done, I consult for a company in New Jersey called Brett Denovia Associates, and we've done trainings for police forces around for different counties. So that's something that could be offered as well. So, you know, they're not nervous that a person is a threat, and they know how to handle it safely. So, you know, that's something else I would recommend. But again, going back to that language piece, recognizing the most important parts of language related to those responses, you know, leaving the house, like teach them, you know, leaving the house is not safe. This is what you can do instead. Like Honey talked about those replacements. I love, Cindy, how you said, did you ask him why? I mean, some kids are able to answer why, some kids aren't, and we just have to use what we can observe, what they're seeking out, and see if you can give them that same sort of sensory experience in a safer manner. And that's what Honey was talking about with those replacements or alternative responses.
For my son, it seemed like a game. It's like he knew when nobody was paying attention, you know, or when I was in the bathroom in the shower or something, and then he's gone. So we did the same thing. We put up the fence, but every once in a while, somebody left the gate open. But we had a medic ID bracelet made for him, and I think it said "I cannot speak," and then if you flipped it over, it had his name and the address, so that if the police found him, they could return him home.
Helpful for sure. I mean, it gives you a little peace of mind that everyone around you knows how to get him home.
You want Vincent to?
Vincent, I think, has a lot to say, so let's turn it over to him.
Perfect.
Wait, I think Katie, you were there. You go. You're unmuted.
I would set up cameras in your house. That way you can supervise them without being up in their grill. Be straight up with them and say, we need to practice staying in one area, and you will have more independence once we get a handle on this.
You know, that's very interesting, because I thought about, you know, putting our Ring cameras, because we haven't hung them up yet, in different locations, but I was worried about it, you know, impeding on their privacy. So I really appreciate
Safety is more important than privacy. And do you also you gotta have locks on all your doors? But I know once they get taller, they can reach, but we put the locks way up high. And we had one on our side door that was really hard to push open, and he didn't have the fine motor skills really to open it. And have the alarm on the door, so you hear it go beep beep as soon as he goes out the door.
Honey had
Open.
those number pads on her doors, both on the inside and outside, which were helpful. And just a quick thought about the cameras. I mean, you don't have to put cameras in the bathroom. or their bedroom, just like that foyer area, like door areas, so that you get alerts when there's movement in that area. I remembered what I wanted to mention. Cindy, you said your son would capitalize on the opportunity of the gate being open and he thought it was like a
Oh yeah, he
game.
knew.
I try to set up games that can get that same type of response and playful reaction. Some kids really, and I think it's their way of like almost like engaging in sarcasm or like, their jokes to kind of like razz people. So
That was my
giving them
son.
opportunities to play games that they can get that and they can kind of get sick of like that desire to get that response. Some kids that is the case for, and that's okay. There's just, again, replacements. There's appropriate ways to get that input and safe ways. And then there's unsafe ways, and unsafe ways will make you very sad. And that could hurt them in a way that they won't be able to have fun anymore. I really try to point that out to kids.
That's a really good idea because for my son, it was a game and he was looking for the reaction and then he would laugh. He thought it was funny. I mean, the police found us, we went and saw him in the car and he was laying in the backseat of the police car with his feet up on the ceiling and he was laughing. He thought it was hilarious. It was a big game. And if he ran away from the house, but usually he knew the neighbors that had pools and he was looking to get into their pool.
Vince, I have one last, I know you have to go. I'm so sorry, but if you could, one more question, if you have time. The last question really is discipline. When we're talking about presuming competence, and, I have 13-year-old boys, right? So how do I presume competence while implementing discipline, but in a non-condescending manner that's appropriate?
I'm going to comment while he types because I have to tell you it's a really hard balance because you see that their brain and their body are disconnected, right? Well, he's typing. You're so cute, Vincent. I love that you're so happy doing this. He could talk to you forever. But it's really hard because we have that like drive to overcompensate, right? Because we know that their body's not doing it, so it's not their fault. So we don't want to like yell at them because they can't control what their brain's not telling their body to do, right? But I feel like, and I don't know what he's going to type, but I feel like Vince would be like, keep talking to my body so my brain interacts and hears it from both angles. So I would be like, Vince, you need to stop your body, turn around and come back here. You cannot walk away from me when I'm talking to you. And I would be like, I know right now, if you can't do that, go take 2 loops around the house and then come back. So if the discipline was, if you're in a room with people, let's communicate with the device. If it's stressing you, just tell me I need a minute, or say I need to run around. Or so we worked really hard on coming up with the balance of you need to stay here, and like that's how he can sit and do all these lessons, right? And talk to people and consults, is because he has trained his body over time. But it used to be we'd pull up the device and he would just run, right? And then he would say, I don't want to do that. You have to, it's almost like we're disciplining his body, right? Because his brain is so sweet and loving and caring, and he doesn't want to run away from me. And it seems so disrespectful, that I would have these issues with my husband, and my husband would say, let's get back here. Like, I'd be like, you can't talk to him that way because he doesn't know what he's doing. So how do you discipline an unruly body, right? And so it was more like we were disciplining his body because he wants to be able to be like, hey, dude, stay here. And then he eventually started staying there when we'd say stuff like that. But we would say, if you have to take 1 loop, go take a loop. And then our balance kind of became, you have to stay here, but I see you're anxious. Go take your loop, come back, and then we'll talk. So we recognize like what his body needed to be able to be almost compliant without saying that so nastily, but not that he has to be compliant, but it's like respectful, right? Like if we're all sitting there having a conversation, he gets up and runs, I'm acknowledging his feelings, but then he comes back. So it's like that coaching the whole motor part, right? It's crazy.
Oh my gosh, you're speaking, you and me are the same.
I know, like everything you're saying, I'm like, I've done the exact same.
And you met my husband, so you know. But
And Heidi
has a hold on because he's so strict and militant and military. And it's like,
Yeah.
sometimes I feel like he's too harsh, and I think he could be a little bit more understanding, but I'm missing something, obviously, that I need to, and I want to be respectful, and I don't want to do the wrong things because I feel like I've done enough wrong. And so I think Vince's insight.
Oh, you've done so much right. You have done so much right. You are such an incredible mom.
You are too.
Well, none of us, we're all highly imperfect. I think that's important to have grace for yourself and even your husband. Something I've found really helpful is using like Vince's voice to help other family members understand like how hard it actually is, so that like like that discipline, it's appropriate for him. It's some level of discipline. It delays getting him, giving him like everything he wants if he's not making safe choices, but it's discipline that's, matched appropriately to him. So I think helping people understand the perspective of your child can be really helpful. I mean, I simply use, what's easy for one kid to carry, it's like carrying one backpack for one child. For kids with sensory regulation challenges and that body disconnect, I think it's like carrying 12 backpacks and then expecting them to keep it together. I think it's just really helpful to understand that perspective.
I'm going to say one thing before Vincent interjects, but Alexandra, I do have to tell you, when we asked Vince who his hero was, now I'm the hippie Vermonter that loves on her earthy mom that loves her kid, but I'm a little like firm at helping them to be their best. I always say raise the bar or they're going to trip over it. So that's always been my motto with my twins. But Bob is the one that's a little more firm, like your husband. And I'm not just saying this. Katie can attest to this. Vincent and Bob are like this. And when he just wrote his blog, he said two things can exist simultaneously, right? You can feel sad about the life that you've been given and work hard, but you can also still really fiercely love your child. Like two things can exist at the same time. But he also said, when we said, who is your hero? He said me second, but he said his dad because he also saw how hard he fought. So to help his family. So I know that Bob took a different approach than me and he's more firm, but I think our children recognize that even if they are harsh and I'm yelling at Bob, don't talk to him that way or don't be so mean, Vincent understands that Bob's intentions are pure and good and only because he wants his son to be okay. So
it's very typical between men and women, husbands and wives, moms and dads, to be that way, that the dads are more strict and the moms are more emotional. Like, no, don't hurt my baby. That's how we feel. But I have heard that when kids have a parent that gives them that is more strict, it makes them feel safe and secure, as opposed to parents that are just, oh, just do whatever you want. That there's no boundaries. They don't have security. So that would probably explain why he feels that way. Vincent, you ready?
We got disciplined in the sense that expectations were crystal clear on both ends, and we always have closure conversations when either party did something to upset the other.
Yeah, can you read that out loud?
Yeah, sure. He said, we got disciplined in the sense that expectations were crystal clear on both ends, and we always have closure conversations when either party did something to upset the other.
And also, Alexandra, don't forget, they're 13-year-olds. We talk about presuming competence and teaching them, age appropriate. Okay. What are typical 13-year-olds like in middle school? They're obnoxious. They think they know it all. They start rebelling against their parents, and it's a natural thing that happens in their bodies, that they start to rebel against their parents because they're starting to become independent and eventually leave the nest someday. I had to realize all that stuff with my own son because I wanted him to stay with me forever and I wanted to treat him like a baby forever and protect him. And then I realized, he's 19. A 19-year-old would be going off to college and not want to hang out with his mother all day.
Oh, it's so true, but it's such a hard age.
It is, but like you said, it's puberty time. Woohoo! To me, that's the worst age. That's the worst.
All right, Vince, you have any closing
Yes.
things to say before you go? I know you have to jump off because I want to be respectful. Katie had it blocked off till noon, so
You're all good.
Well, Alex, while we wait for Vince, I'm happy to give you some connections, and you can choose to.
Thank you. really, really appreciate that because we had an ABA agency come to our home for in-home assessments because I'm desperate. Well, I mean, my boys are only in school 90 minutes a day and we're just drowning. And so insurance covers, and I'm like, okay, but I was straightforward with her and I was like, listen, this is where I stand on ABA at the moment. And she had some of the ABA tendencies that I was like, but she was also like-minded in the health sense. So she came out, being health freedom, and that's very much where I'm at. So I was like, maybe she could be trustworthy. I mean, if you're open, if I could send you what she comes up with for you to review and see if it fits, like,
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah. I mean, you can also put if it's a value to you to not have people talk to your kids like they don't understand or use like a robotic voice or say good job all the time or what's another thing I noticed over the years, talking in front of kids. Put that in your IEP. Put it in bold letters so that
Would an in-home therapist have an IEP? No, right?
no, but like they're receiving a public, I mean,
Oh,
not
no, their school is totally on board. Their school understands everything. Their school is like S2C focused. So
right. I'm sorry. I do remember
Yeah.
that he's they're in an out of
so
district setting.
just the in-home is what I'm trying to get so that we can work on these really like dangerous skills, the things that are happening. And I need help because I'm drowning. I'm literally drowning. I was nice today, but only because I knew this was important. But every other day I'm drowning.
Yeah. In-home therapy, though, should incorporate like and review the IEP. And a child should get an IEP until they're out of school age, whether they're in public education or an out of district placement. So, I mean, the IEP is just nice because it documents, what's been helpful from all of the people involved in their education. And it's a nice place where you can kind of put their like profile of what works and what doesn't work. And then you can kind of hand that off to whomever comes into your house.
Okay, Vince, you ready?
You are a rock star mom, and your boys are so lucky to have you. Brighter days are ahead. Let go of all that pain from the past. No more trauma, just peace.
Oh, Vince. In my heart. Thank you. I love you guys. Oh, Vince, you are such a hero to my family,
That was beautiful, Vince. I've had to learn to forgive myself for things I didn't know until he taught me. So the situations I've put him in. That was so sweet, Vincent.
I want to share something really quick.
Yeah.
There was a quote I read in the past 2 years, and I think it's helpful for all of us, Vince included, is that we're all just walking each other home. And I thought it was a really beautiful quote because we can all contribute to like helping each other on this journey. And I think, Vince, you're a huge part of that too, buddy.
I think that's a perfect way to end it. So thank you everyone for being here. I think this was a great session. I think our viewers are going to learn a lot from that. And it was a lot. And thank you for being open, Alexandra, with all of us about, what's going on with your life. And we're all going to pray for you because you need some help because you got a lot going on there. So, but hopefully that this was a help to you. So.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody, thank you.
Thank you.
That's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed listening and it helped you gain a new perspective. To learn more about our children's book series, Robbie's World and His Spectrum of Adventures, or to learn more about what we do at Robbie's World Foundation, simply visit our website at robbiesworldbook.com.
Thank you for joining us today. Be sure to join us again on our next episode of Spectrum Perspectives.